This is CityCast Twin Cities. I'm Sean McPherson, and here's what the cities are talking about. Madison, did you ever skip high school?
I did, but with permission. I feel like I was always trying to get my teachers to write me notes to other teachers' classes, and then I'd just leave.
Tiffany, were you ever a skipper of high school?
One time my mom let me skip high school, but then I had to vacuum the house.
I had the musician trick where, like, if you grabbed a music stand and a set of music, they would think you were going to something special. So I'd be like, I gotta go. And I'd walk past the security guards and get out. So that was my little skipping high school trick. And shout out to everybody at St. Paul Public Schools who are navigating a couple of days without school while the school is getting ready to provide mobile, or rather online education for folks who do not feel comfortable coming into the schools. Today, we're talking with a journalist who recently traveled with community patrols in Minneapolis. We're also going to catch up with CityCast contributor PaviElle French, who'll be talking about the ICE Out general strike coming up on Friday and discussing autonomy and government disillusionment. What a treat! Right now, we're talking with Madison McVan, a reporter and Report for America Corps member who covers the Trump administration's impact on Minnesota for the Minnesota Reformer. Thank you so much for being here, Madison McVan.
Thanks for having me.
And I also want to introduce Tiffany Bui, our CityCast creative producer, who only skipped school once. Thanks for being here, Tiffany.
You're welcome, Sean, and for only skipping school once.
Madison, you recently traveled with community patrols in Minneapolis that are disrupting ICE operations. Now, disruptors, if you're not familiar, see their work as a way to slow down the work of Operation Metro Surge. And you were with these disruptors both in Minneapolis and also for a short time in Bloomington. The article was compelling. It was really well reported and truly gave a slice of life experience for a thing that a lot of folks don't know about. Can you tell me what your experience was like actually being on these patrols and being with these disruptors?
Yeah, I think I was feeling a lot of the same anxiety that they were feeling being in the car surrounded by ICE agents. This was within a week of Renee Good's killing. So I think that was it was in the back of my mind. It was in the back of their minds. And one of the observers that I rode along with ended up getting arrested a couple days later in the process. So all of that feels very front of mind when you're in the car.
Yeah, I bet. I wanted to just back up a bit and talk more about how the observers do their work. I was at the bus stop at the intersection of Lyndale and Lake in Uptown a week or so back. And within the span of 20 minutes standing there, there were 3 ICE car spottings, what people thought were ICE cars. People were, blowing whistles, honking and stuff. And I was just looking around like I was born yesterday because I could not tell how they knew these cars were ICE cars. So how do these observers know who they are following is an ICE agent?
It's a little bit of a process. So obviously you can't tell just by looking at a car or looking at a person whether they're an ICE agent, especially since ICE agents are like wearing masks a lot of the time, or they might not always be wearing like a label on their uniform. But what they're looking for is trucks and SUVs, tinted windows, out-of-state license plates. There's almost always multiple people in the car because the agents are rarely traveling alone. So if they see some combination of their factors, they might start following one of those vehicles. And then a pretty quick tell that they're federal agents is that the driver will start making maneuvers or pulling into side streets, turning abruptly, trying to see if they're being followed, really. So they pick up on that pretty quickly. And then really it's not until the vehicle stops and people get out of the car that you can tell that it's agents.
I have a little bit of a language question. I think in general life, the words disrupt, patrol, and observe are very different. And this might be my mistake. I sometimes use these interchangeably, even though these words are not interchangeable. So can you talk a little bit about the term patrolling, the term observing, specifically constitutional observing, and a term that maybe I'm coining a lot of disrupting? So I'm just trying to figure out the language of these people.
I mean, that's a great question because that was something I had to think through a lot when I was writing. I landed on patroller as my kind of go-to when I was writing about these specific people. But of course, there are people who observe ICE who aren't patrolling. So, I mean, the language is kind of evolving as we go, and different words obviously have different connotations. I think the people who do this kind of thing would call themselves observers. Constitutional observers that's kind of or legal observers, that's kind of a specific term that has to do with being at the scene of law enforcement action and documenting it, interviewing people who have experienced some kind of use of force, recording video and audio and that kind of thing. So observer is slightly different because you might not be gathering all that information specifically for a potential legal case. But that's certainly in the back of the minds of a lot of these people too. And then some people show up and they're there to just record, and some people want to protest and actively disrupt. It kind of just varies from person to person.
Yeah, and language it can be important, especially in a court of law. So that's like a good clarification. What was it like in that car? Are you like listening to music? Are you like what's happening?
Yeah, there's no music. It's a pretty serious operation. Well, not that serious though, because there is a little bit of joking around that happens. Yeah. I think to keep everyone's mood up. But yeah, there's usually one person driving and a second person who's on the phones. So they're probably monitoring a group chat for the neighborhood, and then possibly, if in this case of these patrollers, being on a group call with everybody else who's out patrolling in the area too. So they're keeping each other updated on ICE's location, potential spottings, confirmed sightings, whether or not they've been boxed in or approached by agents, whether they've seen someone get arrested, and that kind of thing.
In reading your article, Madison, it's clear that in some sense, this is a war of inches, that there's an idea that the time that people are following a particular patroller to figure out if they're being involved is time where ICE is not doing this work that these patrollers disagree with. Can you confirm, do you have a sense that it is working? Is the efficiency slowed down for ICE due to this? Is there anyone who will say that factually? This is for sure slowing down their operation.
I mean, it's hard to say. This is a cat and mouse game that's kind of evolving in real time. So we're seeing the tactics shift on both sides. And for example, one thing I saw when I was riding along with patrollers is they were following a convoy of vehicles, and it was 3 ICE vehicles. They identified who the car belonged to and then drove to the address of the person in the car, basically to indicate, like, we know where you live. At least that was my read of the situation. And then the observer gets a call from her wife saying, agents are at our house, they're banging on the door. So they're certainly spending resources. You know, you can call it intimidation or law enforcement of the people that are doing this kind of patrolling, observing, and following of ICE agents. And I'll mention another way in which I think this bogs down ICE's operations is it really gives the residents of a neighborhood a sense of how ICE is operating and where in any given time. So, for example, there was one day they were picking up a lot of people at bus stops on Lake Street. So one of the observers told me that day she just started going from bus stop to bus stop warning people, hey, we've seen ICE pick up a lot of people at bus stops in this area today. So it just kind of gives people the option to leave if they feel like they need to.
I find this thing particularly haunting about going to the address associated with a vehicle and sort of establishing, we're aware of you, we've ran your numbers. We've also seen people walk up, this was in an NPR news video, but walk up on people and say their full name to establish, like, we already have figured out who you are through running your license plate. This is documented many, many times. So this is not something where, one guy goes off script and decides to do this. There is, at some level, ICE has gone, this is one particular way to scare the crap out of patrollers, is to go to their homes. And it just seems so wrong, so violatory, especially when there is not something substantially illegal about what these people are doing as observers, as followers. This is getting examined in court, but a lot of this goes back to the fundamentals of our country. Why do you think they are using intimidation tactics on people who are not violating the law?
I wish I knew why they were doing that.
Moi aussi.
If any ICE agents would have talked to me about why they've decided to do that, I would love that interview. It would have to be on the record. So if any ICE agents are listening to this, please feel free to reach out if you want to talk about that.
Any ICE agents listening? That's crazy.
But in terms of the intimidation tactics, part of what these observers are trying to do, or disruptors, as you said, is gum up the operation and make these agents feel unwelcome. I mean, that's part of the goal of a lot of the people involved with this, if not everyone. So observers they're basically trying to fight back by using very similar tactics. They're creating crowdsourced lists of license plate numbers associated with ICE vehicles so they can follow ICE back. And then we're seeing ICE agents swap out their license plates frequently or change vehicles in order to counteract that. So that's kind of what I mean by this is like an evolving cat and mouse game between the ICE agents and these observers.
We're going to have more with Madison McVan from the Minnesota Reformer, but before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Minnesota Opera is presenting My Name is Florence, running January 31st through February 8th at the Ordway in downtown St. Paul. This is a world premiere, a brand new opera by composer B.E. Boykin and St. Paul-based librettist Harrison David Rivers. The opera tells the story of Florence Price, an American composer who was the first Black woman to have a symphony performed by a major U.S. orchestra. The opera also explores themes of identity, creativity, family, legacy, and resilience. It's great for audiences who are newer to opera. They got a catchy score that includes influences from musical styles like jazz, gospel, R&B, and hip-hop. This piece will be the first of several premieres from Minnesota Opera's New Works initiative to see the stage over the next several seasons. Minnesota Opera is one of the leading opera companies in the United States when it comes to premiering new works. Previous commissions like Silent Night have received national recognition. In fact, the composer won a Pulitzer Prize. We're right here in your backyard. Join us and be a part of history.
I think the story you shared of the ICE agent telling the observer, like, I know your wife's name, sort of illustrates the personal risk that these observers are taking on. Like, I feel like my understanding of the risk that carries has evolved. Like in the past, it's like, okay, you're recording, the police might tell you to back up, they might yell at you, but we're seeing ICE agents get physical with these observers. Specifically, one of the people you were riding along with, Patty O'Keefe, you described later that while she was observing, her window got smashed in by an agent and she was taken to the Whipple Federal Building and detained. And to confirm, she is a U.S. citizen. Can you talk to us about what she experienced there? Because we don't really know what's going on in there. 3 congressional members were denied access from there a little while back.
Yeah. And I do just want to correct one thing in your introduction to that question.
Yeah.
When the agent approached the vehicle, he used the legal name associated with the car. It wasn't clear if he knew that person was not in the vehicle, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he clearly had like looked up some information and approached and used that name, but not clear if he knew what the relationship of that person was to the people who were actually in the vehicle. So we were planning to publish my story about the ride along on Monday. And I had a call scheduled for Sunday night with Patty and another observer just to tie up some loose ends. But Patty wasn't getting back to me, and I started to get the feeling that maybe something was off. So I started poking around on social media, and that's how I saw the video of ICE agents smashing in her window and detaining her. So I went back to talk to her on Monday after she'd been released without charges and hear about her experience. And she says basically they put her in an unmarked van. The agents ridiculed her. They taunted her and made comments that she found deeply offensive, including about Renee Good. They brought her to the Whipple building, which is the headquarters of ICE in the Twin Cities. They processed her. She witnessed lots of people who looked like immigrants, mostly Latino people, she said, being processed. But then they took her to the side of the building that the agents apparently referred to as being for USCs or US citizens. So she was held not with people who were non-citizens or immigrants, but kind of in this cell with just a couple of other people who also said they'd been arrested while protesting ICE. She said that she could hear people screaming and crying. She said that she was denied a phone call. I interviewed her partner who said that he just wasn't able to get in contact with her. And then eventually that night, they just let her go. And actually, as they were letting her go, she said she walked out of the building and there was a big protest outside of the Whipple building. Actually, at first, she said people thought that she was an ICE agent or something. And so they were kind of yelling at her as she was leaving the building. And then she was like, no, they arrested me for protesting them. And everyone was like, oh, okay, sorry. But
Our
then,
bad.
yeah, but then ICE, or I'm not sure which agency it was, but law enforcement agencies started trying to push back the protesters and used chemical agents on the crowd as she was leaving. So she was kind of dealing with that on her way out.
So they're like, congratulations, you're not detained anymore. Come catch some of this chemical irritant on your way out.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened.
Madison, this is... My previous job was talking between jazz records, and a lot of times the people who were playing, especially from town, are generally eager to talk. They would like to speak about their music, and they trust that Yancey Jameson, who has the job I previously had, and Sean McPherson, and all the people at these radio stations are going to treat their music with respect. But you have built up intimate relationships with people where them being featured in the Reformer is risky. It's risky in a way that talking about your jazz show coming up is not. Can you talk about developing the trust and care to not only cover these people, but photograph these people and include their full names in the article? How did you get there with this community?
Well, I've been covering immigration in the Twin Cities for a while now. So I've just built up some trust with some of the leaders in the immigrant rights movement because I care about getting things right. If I approach my job with as much transparency as I can about what I want to write about, what exactly I think the framing of the story will be. I mean, I told them I went to this story being like, I think a lot of people outside the cities don't really understand what's happening, or even in the cities. And I think there was a narrative that this is an extremely top-down organization, that there's someone dictating how exactly this works. And what I've seen is, like, in reality, it's just a bunch of isolated group chats in different neighborhoods who have adopted the same set of tactics. But there's no one dictating how exactly this works. And I wanted to show that in the story. On my sources side, I think they wanted to show that this is just a group of neighbors coming together to fight back in a way that they've found to be effective. The Reformer photographer Nicole Neary had a good point that by having their faces photographed, it meant that this was not a story about two mysterious masked forces fighting each other. It was a story with people who had names and their faces displayed against people who couldn't be identified wearing masks. And I think that's really powerful too.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible wisdom from Nicole. And I appreciate that transparency and that thinking. I think that's what sets apart reporters like yourself from other folks. You know, anyone has a camera, anybody can, talk to folks, but that thorough code of ethics and like process, I think, is what makes what you're doing different. Also, to speak to like your intent of writing the story, I also have been very surprised to the extent of the organizing. As you write, it's very organized, but it's also decentralized. Like there's no one person, which as someone who's been in a group project, you don't have a leader telling you who to make the slides. Like that's crazy. I was at a community meeting the other night, and this organizer was trying to get people to download Signal because this is how organizers have been, corresponding with each other. And they were like, I want you to know Signal is not just for gay 25-year-olds. And, 2 months ago, I would have been like, Signal is mostly for gay 25-year-olds like myself. Were you also surprised? Like, have you seen anything like this before? By the extent of how organized it is?
I mean, I've just never seen anything like this, period. And I came to the cities in August 2020, and I was covering agriculture for my first couple of years here. So I wasn't really involved in covering, the murder of George Floyd and the aftermath of that. I do think it laid the foundation in some ways because people, particularly in the south side of Minneapolis, they've protested before, they've organized before. And I think the thing that people outside of the neighborhoods where ICE is active don't realize is the extent to which it really feels like when you're on the ground in these neighborhoods, it feels like everyone is watching out their windows, holding a whistle, ready to step outside and start blowing on that whistle as soon as possible. Just the amount that these tactics have permeated on every street and every block. I mean, it's really incredible to witness. Just people collectively deciding that we're all going to do this.
These pictures that your photographer, Nicole, captured, you're in that car too, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, so you got masked agents coming right up to your door, your car door, and you are not rolling down the window. As established, my old job was talking between jazz records. Did you ever go, what the hell am I doing? I've made it. Why did they ever take me off the corn beat? Like, I regret this. Were you scared, and did you regret choosing this path in your career?
In the moment, I didn't feel that scared. Afterwards, I was like, whoa, that was crazy. I probably should have felt more scared than I did. But I think something that helps me as a reporter is I'm pretty good at just locking myself into work mode and just going along for the ride. But no, I certainly don't regret it. I mean, this job can be really hard sometimes, and you witness a lot of difficult things. Like, you see the blood on the airbag and you feel the tear gas. But journalism never really feels as important as it does in these times. And that is kind of what pushes me to continue seeking out these stories and putting myself in situations maybe that other people can't or won't get themselves into.
I certainly don't think you need my cosign on that, but I will cosign on the fact that your reporting matters a tremendous amount right now. I imagine it matters year round, but at this moment, reading something that, again, as Tiffany said, there's an abundance of cameras and there's a dearth of ethics. And to see somebody having both empowered to tell a story from their community means a lot to me, means a lot to our listeners, means a lot to the Twin Cities and beyond. Madison McVan, it has been an honor to chat with you. Thank you for your work. And I imagine we'll be reading more from you. And I just really appreciate the work you've already put in covering these very difficult times we're living through.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to hear from you. Do you have any experience patrolling? Have you ever seen that around your neighborhood? Let us know by texting or leaving us a voicemail on the CityCast Twin Cities hotline, 612-217-0637. Up next, we'll be chatting with our contributor, PaviElle. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Now we'd like to welcome on CityCast contributor, vocalist, musician, activist, and queen of Rondo, PaviElle. PaviElle, I am very glad to have you on the show.
Glad to be here in all of this melee and chaos. I'm just glad to be alive and breathing and able to fight another day.
Thank you for that perspective, and you've been providing perspective for years with your music and also with your activism. I actually want to talk about some of your reflections on autonomy and disillusionment with the government, and for lack of a fancier phrase, leave me alone.
Yeah, leave me alone. Okay.
We are going to get into that. But before we do that, I want to talk about some events that are actually happening. Ice Out is planned for this Friday, January 23rd, a general strike, a day of protest. Can you tell me a little bit about the leaders calling for that and what the plan is for Ice Out?
So it's faith leaders, union leaders, and educators that are calling for a general strike, January 23rd, no work, no school, and no shopping. So, I'm really excited, if that's a weird way to say, but I'm excited that this is the direction that we're turning, because we, the people, have the power, and we need to exert that in all the ways. I mean, there's so many levels of fighting back and of being on the defense and on the offense. And so I love that there's also, we're not making no money for you. We're not going to pretend that, everything's good and continue to hop on these Teams meetings and, act like everything's all right. Like, that's wild. That's wild to me,
It's a completely reasonable thing to be excited about. You can be excited for a day of action because a day of action is what we need.
Especially during the week of, Martin Luther King. I mean, like, this is very important, that we are doing this, because it's very pivotal and it reflects something to me that it's happening over this time specifically.
Now, a lot of times, PaviElle, we're talking about, the equivalent of ping pong competitions and snowshoeing and performances and theater, and all those things are wildly important. I don't want to act like they aren't, and I want to let everybody know you can still find a robust calendar of events on our website as well as in our newsletter. But this is also a time where folks are stepping up to provide mutual aid, to fill a food shelf, to make sure that community members have the support they need. And you have a couple of things to highlight about ways that community members can get involved and support. Can you let us know about those?
I do. There are some wonderful, lovely people that are taking cash box donations and donations of food, clothes, whatever that you can provide that would be helpful to people. And not just, I just want to say, not just things that you think of or the things that would be good for you, but things that are culturally sound, things that other cultures may need. You know what I mean? Because people eat differently. People have different needs. So, be very thoughtful in what you're doing or just donate some money. There's a couple of places that you can donate. And just for safety, I'm just going to give the addresses. And so therefore, one is at 2609 Aldrich Avenue South, Suite 100. And the other one is at 2301 North Oliver Avenue, Minneapolis, and that's North Side. And then you can also reach out to TCMAP, which is the Twin Cities Mutual Aid Project. I believe it's tcmap.org. Be sure to Google it, or not Google it. We have to find something different like GoDuckGo or something like that. Because once again, stop paying people that are being evil.
Do you remember their motto used to be "Do no evil," and I feel like they have messed up on a couple of those things. I do want to confirm you got the URL right, so don't even search tcmap.org is where you find the Twin Cities Mutual Aid Project, and it really is an impressive set of stuff.
The world's on fire, but we still got time. I mean, we all gotta put it on the line. Can't turn a blind eye, everything ain't fine, so put your blind aside. This is a roller coaster journey, yeah, we're all going for a ride.
That is the lovely voice of PaviElle, also the author of that tune, Sands of Time. Your music speaks to me, PaviElle, throughout the years, but especially in times of crisis and in times of deep reflection on society. So before we get into this conversation that I want your music to guide us through, can you talk a little bit about Sands of Time in particular, the tune we just heard?
Sure. So what's wild about it is that it speaks right now, right? But I wrote this thing in 2021 and 22. I actually wrote it at the same time that I wrote Sovereign Suite. So I was doing double duty, which was really wild. Two different pieces, all the way couldn't be differenter. But yeah, it was commissioned by the Sands family in St. Paul. They're community philanthropists and people who like really invest in good things, good art, in people that are really like working. So that piece really meant a lot to me to talk about just the powder keg that it was in 2022 and coming out of pandemic and coming out of 2020 with Brother Floyd was murdered and like coming out of all of that, still trying to have a semblance of love being the forefront because it's very hard for me to approach racism and violence with a loving heart sometimes because I'm a Scorpio and I can go there. but also I really am in this state and in this mode of activism as an artist because of the love that I have for my people. And so I always want to keep the love at the forefront. It's like I have love for most, but not for all.
Well, the love comes through. And again, I'm really glad to be using music as a point of departure for larger conversations. It's beautiful in its own right, but it also, of course, especially with the heritage of Black music, this is a music of resistance, and you stand firmly in that tradition. You, for a long time, have talked about autonomy, independence from the federal government, from some governments in general, and independence from white supremacy, which is hard to get independent of because it's in a lot of places.
It's everywhere.
And for me, the work of Sovereign Suite and a lot of the music in Sovereign Suite carries a lot of sentiment about autonomy and independence. Can you tell me about your thoughts on those topics and also how your music connects with that?
Yeah, so I have been working on what I am calling the Sovereign series now for the last almost 6 years. So this in 2020, it all became about autonomy and themes of sovereignty. I really started investigating like my feelings about that and what my true wants were in this liberation work that I'm doing. And my needs and my wants are complete sovereignty. I want to be able to be who I am without having to acclimate or, having to assimilate or having to put on these things that don't belong on me. And I would love for my people, especially these babies and these young folks coming up, but all my people, to be able to actualize themselves as fully and truly who they are. Because who would we be as people without capitalism and white supremacy? You know what I mean? Like, I think about these things quite a bit in my work because it helps me as an artist keep my imagination to imagine things that people can't.
What is right? Is it the only pathway to freedom is to fight and give up my life? Don't want to live with white supremacy, and for it I'm not gonna die at the hands of systemic oppression. 400 years of psychosis, I know this, I'm tired, got options, and now I'm second guessing what I was taught to believe. Done everything, from begging and pleading to burning and looting to entering the political arena, and we see our people continue to bleed, too accepting, too resilient, living under this anti-black sentiment, still seen as chattel by our government. We're profitable if we live or die, so they good with the suppression.
PaviElle, you passed along Garvey. There's a lot of messages that connect to what we're talking about.
Yes.
How do you put that into a song? How do you take these, like Garvey's writings are dense. A lot of these concepts are dense. In another song, Code Switch, you mentioned Frantz Fanon. Those texts are amazing. They don't sing. How do you make these sentiments sing? How do you make them musical?
So I really think it's the effect that their writings have on me that allow me to write original pieces to kind of channel the sentiment and the feeling, but also say what it is that I want to say without it being what they're saying. I listened to a lot of Marcus Garvey's recordings as I was writing Sovereign, the album in 2020, because that was the album that I did to process my anger from Brother Floyd's murder and Breonna Taylor's murder. I literally wrote Garveyite watching a Facebook Live of an protest breaking out because they had said that Breonna Taylor's killers got off with wanton reckless endangerment or something like that, right? And I watched the protests immediately hit the streets. And as that was happening, all these horrible comments were coming in, just talking about people exercising their right to say that they have dissent with their government that they pay the salaries of, right? And so all these things were going through my mind, and I was just look how evil people can be. And so it was really like pissing me off in real time. And so I would just hit play, listen to it for a moment, write it as I was watching this, hit stop, go back, look at some more. And that's just how I got the whole song. I did it right there, and it took me about an hour. And I wrote that whole song in that time because I was that mad.
I want to go back a little bit because I told you I was going to talk about feeling late to this party, particularly because of being a white person who has always felt catered to. Mm-hmm. At so many moments in my life, I have felt like my vote wasn't decided and people were going to compete for my vote. People competed for my feelings and all these things. That's right. And this is not...
You're seen.
Yes, I am seen as a full-ass human being.
That's right.
As I'm seen as a political... Even as a pawn, I'm seen as a pawn that could be moved from one side of the table to another and could be considered. I'm late to the party of... I'm starting to see this disconnect with the federal government that you have seen for a long time, PaviElle.
Yeah. Yep.
And you have sung into, written into, and not only shared, but done it more than just on stage. You've done it with young people. You've done it with the community you care so much about. And I hope you could talk about how you see the music that you write being more than just a performance piece, but actually something that really works inside of educational settings as well.
Absolutely. So all of my pieces in Sovereign Suite specifically have a companion curriculum that was just written by myself, Laura Kreider, Dr. Shakayla Wanyema, and Natalia Romero Arbeles. I just have to say everybody's name slow so I can get it all out. But we just literally released the curriculum this past June that is based on the work that I did with the American Composer Forum, which was go into 3 different residencies with all ages. So elementary, junior high, high school, and grad students, adults. And so I do a lot of ciphers with kids when I first go into the classroom. My whole thing as an artist is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get in there and I'm going to talk to the teachers and talk about with the teachers the things that their hands are tied. What can you not talk about with your students? Okay, because I can. then after that, I'm trying to have a conversation with the students, and I open up the floor for them, and I stay quiet. I ask the questions and I stay quiet. And this is where all of the beauty is at, because then I can use everything that they're saying to build the cipher. And then next thing you know, we're building a song. Next thing you know, we've got a whole framework of whatever we're going to do with this poetry, or we got a framework of what we're going to do in this dance. But for me, all of my work is political. I don't think that even the stuff that I've written about love is political. And I've always thought that. I think I ride with the sentiment of Nina Simone, where she said the job of the artist is to reflect the times. And I am a Nina Simone type artist. I am not into brand. I am not into being an entertainer. I am not into any of these other cool things about being an artist. And I'm not even going to down talk them and say, oh, we don't need that, because we do. But my job as an artist is to not only teach, but it is to be the one that jumps in the water first.
This day today is so abusive, but it won't weaken my will to live. This day today so abusive, but it won't weaken my will to live. This day today so abusive, but it won't weaken my will to live. My life means so much more than just a
PaviElle, thank you for the community resources you recommended. Thank you for letting us use your music as a point of departure to talk about how a lot of folks are navigating their feelings right now. And thank you for all the great music and education you bring to our community.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing the space for us to talk very real, because I'm having a hard time with not being real. So thank you so much for allowing us this space to connect with our people. And to my people out here in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, everywhere, keep fighting. We love each other and we will get through this, but keep fighting.
You didn't listen when I said it nicely. There's only so much anger I can put into my writing. You don't like it, fight me. Your cognitive dissonance is frightening. Don't know whether to fight, flight, or strike it like lightning.
That's all for today here on CityCast Twin Cities. I'm your host, Sean McPherson. Madison McVan, PaviElle French, Tiffany Bui, thank you for being here today. You can get more news delivered right to your inbox by subscribing to the CityCast Twin Cities newsletter. If you enjoyed today's show, why not share this podcast with a Scorpio? We'll see you back here tomorrow for more news from around the city.